Julie Andrews had one of the most iconic voices in Hollywood history, but one botched surgery destroyed it forever. Known for Mary Poppins and The Sound of Music, her flawless 4-octane soprano was considered untouchable. But in 1997, a simple procedure to remove harmless nodules went horribly wrong. Surgeons permanently mutilated her vocal cords, leaving her in agonizing pain just to speak. Andrews later sued the hospital and won, but no lawsuit could undo the damage, as the world's most beloved singing voice was silenced forever. This NASA scientist helped land humans on the moon, but his rockets were first built with slave labor in Nazi death camps. Wernher von Braun, the celebrated architect of the Apollo missions, once ran the V-2 rocket program for Adolf Hitler. The rockets were manufactured using prisoners from the Dora Mittelbau concentration camp, who were typically starved, beaten, and worked until they died. Conditions were so brutal that over 20,000 prisoners were killed while making the rockets, far more than the rockets ever killed in combat. But after the war, von Braun wasn't punished. Instead, the US secretly brought him to America under Operation Paperclip, erased most of his Nazi past, and turned him into a national hero. A shocking medical scandal is unfolding in Austria, where a neurosurgeon is facing criminal charges for allegedly letting her 12-year-old daughter drill a hole into a patient's skull during emergency brain surgery. The unconscious patient had suffered traumatic head injuries and needed a burr hole to relieve pressure, yet prosecutors say the surgeon handed the drill to her daughter and let her perform the procedure herself, despite the child having zero medical training. The girl never should have been inside the operating room in the first place, as strict hospital protocol forbids minors or unauthorized personnel from being present during sterile surgeries, let alone touching the equipment, let alone drilling into patients' skulls. The patient was never informed a child would be involved, and only discovered the truth months later after an anonymous tip led to an investigation. The hospital immediately fired the surgeons involved, and the lead doctor is now on trial for causing bodily harm and abusing her position. Although the patient survived, he reportedly still suffers long-term effects, and the court called the doctor's decision a catastrophic breach of trust and professionalism. This was the moment a 7-Eleven was destroyed during a brazen Christmas Eve ATM theft in Texas. In the early morning hours of December 24, 2025, surveillance footage from a 7-Eleven near Fort Worth shows two suspects smashing through the front of the store, attaching a cable to the ATM, and using a stolen SUV to violently rip the machine through the building. After destroying half the store, the suspects fled, abandoning the ATM and SUV nearby, and still remain unidentified. There's a tree in Pakistan that's been chained and officially arrested since 1898. This happened when a drunk British officer thought the tree was moving towards him and ordered one of his men to arrest it. 3 Nigerian men were arrested at Oran International Airport in Algeria after trying to fly to Dubai disguised as Arab women. Wrapped in hijabs, niqabs, and heavy makeup, they tried to slip through security, but officers noticed their documents didn't match and spotted stubble beneath the veils. A quick secondary check exposed the trio immediately, and they were taken into custody on the spot. In one of the dumbest crimes in history, an Arizona man who worked for UPS stole a diamond worth $160,000, then traded it for some weed. Instead of selling it or hiding it, he handed the massive gemstone to his dealer for a $20 bag of marijuana. The dealer, shocked by how valuable it looked, brought it to a jewelry store to get it appraised, and the person behind the counter instantly recognized it as stolen. Police were called, and within days, both the thief and the dealer were arrested. In the end, the man didn't just waste a life-changing fortune, he basically turned himself in for the price of a dub. On the other hand, in 1968 Japan, a man pulled off one of the most brilliant heists in history without the use of a single weapon. Disguised as a motorcycle cop, he pulled over a bank vehicle carrying over $10 million in cash and claimed it was rigged to explode. To make it believable, he lit a flare underneath the car and yelled for the employees to run. They bolted in fear as he calmly got in, drove off with all the cash, and vanished. Despite the largest manhunt Japan had ever seen, interviewing over 100,000 people, neither the thief nor the money has ever been found. Here's a disturbing video of a man performing a religious milk offering ritual in the Ganges River in India, while nearby homeless and malnourished children rush in and try to catch it to drink. The ritual, meant to symbolize devotion and abundance, turns into a heartbreaking scene of desperation, as children who clearly have nothing to eat are forced to watch food being poured away, a moment that captures the extreme poverty surrounding one of the holiest rivers in the world. In 2012, archaeologists digging beneath a parking lot in Leicester, England, uncovered a human skeleton buried beneath several feet of asphalt. DNA testing later confirmed the remains belonged to King Richard III, the English king who was killed in battle in 1485 and had been missing for more than 500 years. One of the key clues was the severe curvature of the spine found in the skeleton, matching historical accounts that Richard had scoliosis and an uneven shoulder. The discovery solved one of England's oldest royal mysteries and revealed that a medieval king had been buried beneath what later became a modern car park. They reported her missing, but they already knew exactly where she was, sealed in a plastic bin and left to rot for nearly a year. 12-year-old Mimi Torres Garcia slowly wasted away inside her own Connecticut home, starved, zip-tied, and forced to live in the corner on pee pads like an animal. After her mother withdrew her from school and claimed she was homeschooling, Mimi vanished from the outside world as the adults in her house allegedly tortured her for months. Her aunt even took a photo of Mimi tied up and admitted that she knew the girl was going to die. When Mimi finally succumbed to the torture sometime in late 2024, they didn't call for help. They instead hid her corpse in the basement for months, then stuffed her body into a sealed plastic container and moved it with them to another house. The mother's boyfriend allegedly dumped the container behind an abandoned property, and it sat there for nearly a month until a passerby reported the smell. When police opened it, they found the decomposed remains of a little girl who had once been full of life. As of now, all three adults, Mimi's mother, her aunt, and the mother's boyfriend, have been arrested and charged with murder and abuse of a corpse. While on his way to Toronto to film the second season of Gen V in March of 2024, actor Chance Perdomo tragically died in a single-vehicle motorcycle crash at just 27 years old. Authorities confirmed no other vehicles were involved, but never released the exact location, cause of the crash, weather condition, or road details, leaving the true circumstances unknown. Because he died alone, there were no public witnesses and no full incident report, sparking endless speculation among fans. Eerily, just days before the accident, he posted a photo of his motorcycle on Instagram with the ominous caption, "The final calm before the storm." His death impacted Gen V so heavily that production was postponed, and instead of recasting his character, the writers rewrote the entire season around his absence, a rare move that shows just how important and irreplaceable he was as an actor. In 1996, a stray mother cat in New York City became famous for performing one of the most heroic acts in animal rescue history. When the abandoned garage she and her newborn kittens were living in caught fire, she ran through the flames 5 separate times, carrying each kitten out one by one. By the time she saved the last one, her eyes were blistered shut, her ears and paws were burned, and her fur was scorched. But she touched each kitten with her nose to make sure they were all alive before collapsing unconscious. Nicknamed Scarlet, she later recovered at a veterinary hospital and was reunited with her kittens, all of whom survived. The story went viral worldwide, and the mother cat and all 5 of her babies were eventually adopted into loving homes. David Parker Ray wasn't just a serial killer. He did things to women so horrific that the FBI agents who investigated him needed therapy. In Elephant Butte, New Mexico, he constructed a custom soundproof trailer he called the Toy Box, filled with whips, chains, saws, medical equipment, video cameras, and even a mechanical torture device he built himself. When victims woke up strapped to a gynecologist table, he played a 20-minute audio tape calmly explaining how he was going to rape, torture, and break them over the next several days.
Hello there, bitch. Are you comfortable right now? I doubt it. Wrists and ankles chained, gagged, probably blindfolded. You are disoriented and scared too, I would imagine. Perfectly normal under the circumstances. Now, you are obviously here against your will. Totally helpless. Don't know where you're at. Don't know what's going to happen to you. You're very scared or very pissed off. I'm sure that you've already tried to get your wrists and ankles loose. No, you can't. Now you're just waiting to see what's going to happen next. You probably think you're going to be raped, and you're f***ing sure right about that.
Ray's girlfriend and even his own daughter helped him kidnap women, and after days of torture, he would drug them with amnesia-inducing sedatives and dump them in the desert so disoriented they couldn't report what happened. Investigators later found journals detailing 40 years of abuse and believe he murdered up to 60 women, but not a single body has ever been found. Ray was only caught in 1999 when a victim escaped naked with a metal dog collar still around her neck, leading police to the Toy Box, a torture chamber so sadistic sadistic that FBI agents who entered it required extensive therapy. But despite the unimaginable horror, Ray was never convicted of murder, dying of a heart attack in 2002 and taking his most awful secrets to his grave. This was the moment a military wife was caught on camera trying to poison her husband. In 2023 in Tucson, Arizona, Melody Feliciano Johnson repeatedly poured bleach into the coffee maker of her U.S. Air Force husband during a bitter divorce. When his coffee began tasting strange and making him feel nauseous, he first assumed the machine had mold before testing it with pool strips, which showed dangerously high levels of chlorine. Suspecting he was being poisoned, he set up hidden cameras in their kitchen, which later recorded his wife adding bleach to the coffee reservoir. Although he avoided serious injury or death by pretending to drink the coffee, investigators said he believed she was trying to kill him to collect his life insurance benefits. She later took a plea deal and was sentenced to probation, mental health treatment, and a no-contact order. These are the graves believed to belong to the 63 wives of Indian General Afzal Khan dating back to 1659. Historical accounts suggest an astrologer predicted the general would die in his next battle, and fearing that his wives would remarry after his death, he ordered all 63 of them to be executed before leaving for war. Soon afterward, Khan was killed in battle just as the prophecy foretold. Today, the cemetery still stands in Afzalpura, India, a site tied to one of the darkest stories associated with honor, power, and possession in Indian history. 17-year-old Louisiana girl Caitlin Strait was 28 weeks pregnant when a road rage incident suddenly ended her life. She was shot in the head, declared brain dead, and doctors had to perform an emergency C-section to save her baby. She and her friends were simply driving when another vehicle pulled up and opened fire. Even worse, police said they had no idea why the shooter even targeted them. There was no crash, no argument, no warning. The teen was rushed to the hospital, but her injuries were irreversible, and she was kept alive just long enough to deliver her premature baby. To this day, the killer has never been found, and the motive remains a mystery. In 1968, 20-year-old college student Barbara Jane Mackle was bedridden with the flu in a Georgia motel, unaware that two strangers had been stalking her and planned one of the most sadistic kidnappings in U.S. history. At 4 a.m., there was a knock at the door. A man dressed as a police officer stood outside with a badge, claiming Barbara's boyfriend had been in a serious car accident and was asking for her. But it was a calculated lie. The kidnappers had researched her personal life, knew her boyfriend's name, and used emotional manipulation to get her mother to open the door. The second they stepped inside, the disguise dropped. The man pulled a gun. His female accomplice used chloroform on her mother, and Barbara was tackled to the ground. As they tied her up and dragged her away, they said that if she screamed or fought back, they would kill her boyfriend. Sick, terrified, and believing her silence was the only way to protect him, Barbara didn't resist as they shoved her into a car and drove deep into the woods. There, the kidnappers revealed something even more twisted. They had built a custom coffin for Barbara, just 6 feet long, 2 feet wide, and 3 feet high, equipped with a dim light, a fan, and water laced with sedatives to keep her weak and compliant. Before sealing the lid, they snapped a Polaroid of her trapped inside, holding a sign that said kidnapped, then buried her alive under the dirt. Alone with the flu in total darkness, Barbara could barely move as the fan buzzed weakly. Insects crawled across her skin, and she prayed that the air wouldn't run out. The kidnappers then contacted her father, Robert F. Mackle, a millionaire real estate tycoon, and demanded $500,000 in cash, one of the largest ransom demands in U.S. history. Despite FBI warnings, her father personally paid the ransom, driving the money himself while federal agents hid in his trunk. But after they took the cash, the kidnappers ran off without revealing where she was buried, leaving the FBI racing to locate a hidden grave in miles of forest while Barbara was slowly suffocating underground. For 83 agonizing hours, she lay buried alive, hallucinating from fear and sedatives. At one point, rainwater began leaking into the coffin and she was prepared to drown. When the FBI finally captured the kidnapper and forced him to talk, agents dug frantically through the dirt until they heard faint knocking from below. They ripped the lid open, and a trembling, dirt-covered Barbara whispered, "You're the most beautiful sight I've ever seen." Her kidnapper, Gary Christ, was sentenced to life but paroled after just 10 years, became a doctor, and was later arrested again for smuggling drugs. This is why you should never let anyone kiss your baby. Or just don't kiss someone else's baby. A 2-year-old boy from England recently lost vision in his left eye after someone with an active cold sore kissed him, transferring the herpes simplex virus directly into his eye. The infection caused a blister to form on his cornea that quickly turned into a 4-millimeter wide open wound, leading to repeated infections and permanent nerve damage. Doctors said the virus destroyed the feeling in that eye, and the brain eventually stopped sending signals to it, leaving him completely blind on that side. His parents tested negative for herpes, so doctors doctors believe an acquaintance unknowingly passed the virus through a kiss. Despite weeks of treatment, the damage was irreversible, and doctors were later forced to sew his eyelid shut to protect what remained of that eye. In June of 2004, an 8-year-old girl slipped into the active pool at the Fort Worth Water Gardens, a fountain system powered by strong underground pumps that created a hidden undertow. When her father and 2 brothers jumped in to save her, they were immediately dragged under by the suction and drowned. A 4th bystander who tried to help was also pulled in and killed. None of them realized the pool contained currents strong enough to trap adults underwater, and by the time the pumps were shut off, all 4 rescuers were already dead. MF Doom, the masked supervillain of hip-hop, died in a way just as mysterious as the persona he created. On Halloween Day in 2020, he passed away at 49, but his death was kept completely secret for 62 days. For 2 months, fans continued listening to his music and waiting for new projects, unaware that he was already gone. Then on New Year's Eve, his wife quietly announced his passing, but gave no cause of death or any further details. To this day, the circumstances remain undisclosed, sparking endless speculation. It felt strangely fitting. Doom built his entire identity around mystery and anonymity, sometimes even sending imposters to perform in his place. In the end, he died on Halloween, vanished in silence, and left behind one final mystery. In 1929, 6-year-old Carl Newton Mahan became the youngest person in American history to be charged with murder, then sat in a courtroom playing with a doll. The Kentucky boy had gotten into a fight with an 8-year-old named Cecil Van Hoos over a piece of scrap metal. Cecil reportedly slapped him, so Carl ran home, grabbed his father's shotgun, and blasted the older boy, killing him instantly. Because of the shocking nature of the crime, Carl was actually put on trial for murder, sitting in the courtroom so young that they had to give him toys to keep him calm. The jury found him guilty of manslaughter and sentenced him to 15 years in reform school, but the conviction was quickly overturned due to public outrage. When Tupac Shakur was shot and killed at the age of 25 in September of 1996, his longtime rival, the notorious B.I.G., was reportedly devastated. Despite their very public feud, multiple people close to Biggie said he cried when he heard the news and appeared genuinely shaken, telling friends, "Shit got effed up somewhere along the way, but that was my end." The two had once been close friends, but everything changed in 1994 when Tupac was robbed and shot 5 times at a New York recording studio. Tupac believed people close to Biggie knew about the attack, especially after Biggie released the song "Who Shot Ya" soon afterward. Biggie insisted he had nothing to do with it and said the song had been recorded long before the shooting, but the damage was done. The East Coast-West Coast rivalry, fueled by diss tracks, media pressure, and growing paranoia about being shot, turned them into bitter enemies. But behind the scenes, Biggie reportedly feared the violence had gone too far and worried he might be next. 6 months later, Biggie was shot and killed in Los Angeles by a drive-by shooting at the young age of 24. Both murders still remain unsolved to this day, turning one of hip-hop's most famous rivalries into one of its darkest tragedies. In 2021, escapologist Jonathan Goodwin attempted one of the most dangerous stunts ever filmed for America's Got Talent Extreme, but it went catastrophically wrong. Suspended in a straitjacket between 2 swinging cars rigged to explode, the timing malfunctioned and the vehicles slammed together with him still in between before he plummeted more than 30 feet to the ground. The impact severed his spinal cord, shattered both legs and shoulder blades, destroyed a kidney, and left him permanently paralyzed. He was airlifted from the set in critical condition, underwent multiple surgeries, and spent months hospitalized before being discharged in early 2022. Now confined to a wheelchair for life, Goodwin has described the incident as a miracle of survival. The next year, Goodwin filed a lawsuit against NBC Universal and others, accusing them of negligence, inadequate safety protocols, and a production that valued spectacle over human life. The filing claims the stunt was rushed, chaotic, and staffed by a team that lacked the necessary expertise, and that Goodwin will be wheelchair-bound for the rest of his life because of it. The murder of 6-year-old beauty queen JonBenet Ramsey is one of the most baffling cases in American history, and the details are far darker than most people realize. On Christmas night in 1996, her parents found a bizarre 3-page ransom note demanding $118,000, the exact amount of her father's recent bonus, written on paper from inside their own home. Hours later, JonBenet's father reportedly discovered her body in the basement, strangled with a homemade garrote made from one of her mother's paintbrushes, her skull fractured, and her wrists loosely tied as if staged. There are also signs of possible sexual trauma, suggesting she may have been assaulted before or after death. Meanwhile, the autopsy revealed partially digested pineapple in her stomach, even though her parents claimed she went straight to bed that night. A bowl of pineapple with her brother Burke's fingerprints was later found on the kitchen table. There were no footprints in the snow outside, suggesting the killer never entered or left the house. Police later learned the basement window was already broken and the family never fixed it. The most popular theory today is that JonBenet was accidentally killed by her older brother Burke during a sudden outburst, possibly over the pineapple, and that their parents staged the ransom note and crime scene to protect him. This theory, while never proven, explains many of the inconsistencies in the evidence. But despite massive media attention, DNA tests, false confessions, and countless theories involving intruders, cover-ups, and family secrets, no one has ever been charged. Nearly 30 years later, the case still remains unsolved. In 1995, 6-year-old Elisa Izquierdo from Brooklyn became the face of one of the most horrifying child abuse cases in New York history. After years of living safely with relatives, Elisa was placed back in the care of her biological mother, Awilda Lopez, despite repeated warnings from family members and school officials about ongoing abuse and neglect. Almost immediately, neighbors and teachers noticed that Elisa had changed. She often arrived at school bruised, withdrawn, and terrified to go home. Over the next year, Awilda subjected her daughter to relentless cruelty. Elisa was often locked in a dark room for hours, forced to eat scraps or nothing at all, and denied basic care. Witnesses later recalled hearing her cry for help through the walls, while her mother screamed insults and accused her of being evil. She was beaten repeatedly, forced to sleep on the floor, and frequently sent to school with visible marks that no one acted on. In November of 1995, the abuse reached its breaking point. Awilda slammed Elisa's head into a concrete wall, inflicting a massive head injury that caused fatal brain damage, and by the time paramedics arrived, she couldn't be saved. Autopsy findings revealed injuries consistent with chronic physical and sexual abuse, including genital trauma and signs of repeated violation. Awilda was later convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. After serving over 2 decades, she was released in April of 2022, a decision that reignited outrage among those who still remember Elisa's case. Her case horrified New Yorkers not just because of its brutality, but because it was preventable. Teachers, neighbors, and relatives had all tried to report what was happening, yet every warning was ignored. In the aftermath, the city passed Elisa's law, aimed at preventing child welfare agencies from concealing such failures ever again. Her husband's disgusting secret drove her insane, and what she did next was pure horror. In 2020, 59-year-old Corinna Smith from Cheshire, England, learned that her husband Michael Baines had allegedly been sexually abusing their children for years. Enraged and unable to sleep, she boiled a pot of water, stirred in 3 bags of sugar to make it thicker and stickier, then poured the scalding mixture over him as he lay in bed. The sugar turned the water into a syrup that clung to his skin, causing burns so deep they exposed his flesh. Baines screamed in agony and survived for 5 excruciating weeks before succumbing to his injuries. Smith later told police she simply lost control after finding out what he'd done. She was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 12 years. In 1985, talk show host Richard Belzer invited Hulk Hogan and Mr. T on his show to promote the first ever WrestleMania. To demonstrate a wrestling hold, Hogan placed Belzer in a front chinlock that instantly cut off blood flow. Belzer passed out within seconds, went limp, and collapsed headfirst onto the studio floor, splitting his head open on live television. He regained consciousness with blood pooling on the stage and later needed stitches.
See? It works. All right, brother.
And now, we'll be right back after this word from you-know-who. We'll be right back.
Belzer later sued Hogan and the WWF for $5 million but settled out of court, reportedly using the payout to buy a house he jokingly called Ches Hogan. In 1945, 12-year-old Paul Cusack was reported missing after going out to play near his home in Euclid, Ohio. The next morning, his father began searching nearby lots and made a horrific discovery in a storage yard used by a grain company. Paul had been accidentally buried alive beneath an avalanche of thousands of pounds of split peas after heavy sacks of them toppled over and collapsed on top of him while he was playing nearby. Brendan Fraser's brief collapse was driven by years of physical destruction, psychological breakdown, and what many believe was a Hollywood blacklist. At the height of his career, he was performing nearly all of his own stunts, which led to multiple herniated discs, spinal compression, a fractured pelvis, and repeated surgeries that left him in constant pain. In 1999, Fraser Fraser nearly died during the filming of The Mummy when a hanging stunt went horribly wrong and the rope was pulled too tightly, cutting off blood flow to his brain and causing him to lose consciousness. He later said doctors told him he came dangerously close to serious brain injury or death. Around the same time, he endured the passing of his mother, a financially devastating divorce, and severe depression. Brendan later alleged he was sexually assaulted by a powerful Hollywood executive in 2003, and after speaking about it privately, his career abruptly stalled. Many believe he was quietly blacklisted as major roles vanished almost overnight, leaving him to describe himself as invisible for years while living in pain and isolation. After roughly a 15-year hiatus, Fraser ultimately rebuilt his life and career, returning to Hollywood on his own terms and finding renewed stability and appreciation from fans. Lacey Fletcher was a 36-year-old woman from Slaughter, Louisiana, who was found dead in January of 2022 after years of being left to rot on a couch in her parents' home. She suffered from severe autism and was reportedly nonverbal. When authorities arrived, Lacey's body was fused to the sofa, surrounded by years of human waste, insects, and mold. She only weighed about 96 pounds, had bed sores that exposed bone, and was covered in feces and maggots. Coroners ruled her death a homicide caused by severe neglect, starvation, and untreated medical conditions. Investigators determined she had likely been left in the same position for at least 12 years, slowly melting into the sofa while her parents lived in the house with her. Despite the horrific condition of her body and the prolonged suffering, her parents were initially charged with second-degree murder, but the charges were later reduced and ultimately dismissed by a judge in 2024, since the judge ruled that prosecutors couldn't prove that Lacey's parents intended to kill her or knowingly caused her death, triggering widespread public outrage over how such prolonged extreme neglect could result in no prison sentence. In one of the most evil cases of betrayal ever recorded, a man from New Zealand secretly infected his wife with HIV using a sewing needle dipped in his own blood. After cheating on her and being diagnosed himself, he feared she would leave him. So while she slept, he pricked her leg, leaving only a tiny sting and a red mark. Months later, during a routine checkup, she tested positive for the virus and confronted him. He chillingly confessed, saying he only did it so she would be the same as me and would never leave. Prosecutors later called it an act of pure cruelty, and the man was sentenced to prison for willfully injecting another with a disease, a charge so rare that even the judge called it almost without precedent. Here's a photo of a 71-year-old man in profound distress outside a burning residential complex in Hong Kong on November 26, 2025, after telling reporters his wife was trapped inside as smoke and flames engulfed the high-rise towers. The blaze began in the afternoon at a nearby housing estate and quickly spread through bamboo scaffolding and flammable renovation materials, consuming 7 of the 8 apartment blocks and sending dark plumes of smoke into the sky. Authorities later confirmed the fire became one of the deadliest residential blazes in Hong Kong history, with the final official death toll reaching 168 people, including a firefighter. In 2003, at the Toledo Hospital in Ohio, a man named Paul Fudach Jr. donated one of his kidneys to save the life of his sister, Sarah. Surgeons successfully removed the healthy organ and placed it in a sterile container as they prepared for the transplant. But while it sat unattended outside the operating room, a nurse found the container, did not realize it held a donated human kidney, and mistakenly threw the $250,000 organ into a medical waste bin. By the time the error was discovered, the kidney had been contaminated and had to be destroyed. Paul had undergone major surgery for nothing, and Sarah lost her chance at a life-saving transplant. She did finally receive a donor kidney months later as the hospital admitted fault, paid a settlement, and rewrote the organ handling procedures after the incident. This was the moment an Indonesian conservationist broke down in tears after finally witnessing one of the rarest flowers on Earth bloom. After searching the rainforests of Sumatra for 13 years, Diki Andriki and his team found a Rafflesia, a parasitic flower often nicknamed a corpse flower because it releases a powerful odor of rotting flesh to attract insects. The plant spends most of its life hidden inside a host vine and only blooms for a few days, making sightings incredibly rare as researchers never even see one in their lifetime. When the massive, foul-smelling flower began to open in front of him, the weight of more than a decade of dangerous jungle expeditions and failed searches finally hit. This is one of the rarest atmospheric events ever caught on video. Upward lightning erupting from the summit of Volcán de Agua in Guatemala. The bolts appear to tear straight out of the volcano, making it look less like weather and more like something unnatural unfolding in real time. Unlike normal lightning that strikes downward from clouds, this phenomenon shoots upward from the ground into the storm above, triggered by intense electrical imbalance. It's so uncommon that storm chasers never even see it once in their lifetime, and it's almost never captured this clearly over a populated city. In one of the most disturbing cases ever shown on My Strange Addiction, a Tennessee woman named Casey developed a heartbreaking obsession after her husband Sean died suddenly from an asthma attack. Stricken with grief, she began carrying his urn everywhere, talking to it, sleeping beside it, and treating it like her husband was still alive. One day, when some of the ashes accidentally spilled on her hand, she instinctively licked them off, and soon enough became addicted to doing it deliberately. She admitted to eating the ashes up to 5 times per day, worried that if she ever stopped, she'd truly lose him forever. The ashes reportedly tasted like sand and rotten eggs, but she couldn't resist the rare feeling of closeness it gave her. Over time, she eventually consumed nearly a pound of her husband's remains, until appearing on the show finally made her realize how far her grief had gone. After filming, Casey entered therapy and eventually stopped consuming the ashes, keeping his urn nearby as a reminder of love rather than loss. This was the moment a mermaid performer was attacked by a Chinese sturgeon during a live aquarium show. The performer, Maria Zelenina, was swimming inside a tank at Xishuangbanna Primitive Forest Park when the massive fish lunged forward without warning and pulled her head into its jaws as spectators watched in horror. She fought free underwater and surfaced in visible distress with her goggles ripped off, suffering from facial bruising, swelling around her eye, and lingering pain that affected her vision, later requiring medical treatment. While there are no confirmed cases of a sturgeon killing a human, the species can grow over 10 feet long, weighs hundreds of pounds, and has powerful jaws capable of crushing bone, meaning a sustained bite or loss of air underwater could easily be fatal. Here's a clip showing the importance of being aware of your surroundings at all times. In the video, a family is unloading their car in what many commenters believe to be a South American country like Argentina. Before going inside, the woman immediately senses something is wrong when a car pulls up directly in front of her. Without hesitation, she runs inside and locks the door just seconds before the men can reach the house. With no access to the home, the men quickly grab items from the family's car, get back in their vehicle, and speed off. In 2022, in Rockdale, England, police were searching for 18-year-old Joshua Dobson, who was wanted for stealing a car, driving while disqualified, and failing to pay for fuel. When police arrived at his home to arrest him, they found no sign of him, but they noticed a giant teddy bear sitting in the room that appeared to be subtly moving as if it were breathing. Suspicious, police approached the stuffed animal and discovered Dobson hiding inside of it, having cut it open and climbed inside in an attempt to evade capture. He was immediately arrested at the scene and later sentenced to 9 months in prison for the offenses. In 2023, 44-year-old Shikundi Tati of Maryland was arrested after police say he disguised himself as a woman to gain access to women's locker rooms at various gyms across the region. Investigators allege he secretly recorded women while they showered, using the disguise to avoid suspicion. The case came to light after gym members reported consistent suspicious behavior, leading to an investigation that uncovered the hidden recordings and led to his arrest. In November of 2023, 56-year-old Bart Ryder went in for a routine cataract surgery in Colorado and died because no one realized he stopped breathing. A lawsuit later revealed that the surgeon and anesthesiologist were playing a music bingo game during the procedure, and although Ryder was hooked up to monitors, the audible alarms weren't turned on. He soon turned blue under the sheet while staff focused on the playlist instead of his vitals. By the time they realized his oxygen had crashed about 11 minutes in, he'd already suffered fatal cardiac arrest. Both doctors admitted under oath that they were playing the game, and the case was settled outside of court. This photo was taken at 10:28 a.m. on 9/11 by photographer Bill Bigart, just seconds before the North Tower collapsed and killed him. Bigart had rushed toward the burning towers while most people were running away, documenting the chaos from the streets below. When crews later found his body in the rubble, they also recovered his cameras and memory cards, which held the final 150 photos of his life, including this one, time-stamped less than 10 seconds before the collapse buried him where he stood. So if you haven't been following, 15-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez went missing in August of 2025, and after several weeks with no sightings, her body was discovered on September 8th inside the front trunk of an abandoned Tesla registered to musician David in the Hollywood Hills. She was wrapped in plastic, dismembered, severely decomposed, and the medical examiner couldn't immediately determine how she died or how long she'd been dead. Now the newest details reveal that her remains had actually been frozen before being placed in the car, and that's a major problem for investigators. investigators. Freezing and thawing a body destroys bruising, masks injuries, washes away blood patterns, and can literally erase the signs that tell examiners whether someone was beaten, stabbed, strangled, or died another way. After the body was frozen, it then sat in the Tesla for 2 to 4 weeks, thawing and decomposing while wiping out whatever forensic clues were left. David hasn't cooperated and remains a suspect but still hasn't been arrested yet because the autopsy is incomplete and prosecutors can't file major charges until the cause of death is confirmed. The freezing detail is why investigators are now struggling to determine when she died, what was done to her, and who handled her body in the weeks she was missing. David's upcoming tour dates, album promo, and public appearances have all been canceled as the case remains under investigation.